Well, hello, welcome. I'm here with Misa Sugiura, and we're going to talk about Come On In, an anthology that we both have a piece in. I don't have an advanced review copy, so I printed out the cover. I'm going to talk about Misa's beautiful story and a little bit about kind of what drew us to the anthology, and just give people a little taste of what they can expect in Come On In. And actually, I should read the full title: 15 Stories of Immigration and Finding Home. Come On In. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm honored.
I'm excited. I'm super excited. A note, you are my first one of these that I'm doing. So anything could happen. There's a tropical storm going on outside my window. It's quarantine. We're going to go all in on 2020 here. Okay. I'm going to read your bio so that people can know a little bit more about you, although I'm sure most people will have already known this, but I'm going to read it anyway. Misa Sugiura's ancestors. Oh, and I want you to pick one of these and tell me which one you want to tell me about, because I want to hear all the stories. Ancestors include a poet, a priestess, a samurai, and a stowaway. Her first novel, It's Not Like It's a Secret, won the Asian Pacific Islander American Librarians Association Award for Young Adult Literature. Her second novel, This Time Will Be Different, made the best of 2019 lists of YALSA, Kirkus, the New York Public Library, and the Chicago Public Library. No small feat. Her short story, Where I'm From, which is the one we're going to be talking about today, appears in Come On In, a young adult anthology, which includes stories about immigration. Misa was born and raised in the Chicago area. She lived in Japan for 3 years after college before moving to the San Francisco Bay Area, where she now lives and writes. Under a big oak, I found on your website.
Yes.
Did I get to see the oak when you were outside, or?
Yeah, I think you probably did. I can, yeah.
I love that. That's very cool. So, so tell me a little bit about one of your cool and intriguing ancestors.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. I guess we can do the stowaway. He was my great grandfather on my dad's side, and he kind of sort of ran away from home, obviously, and he was living in the city I've already forgot. I don't know if it was which port city it was, if it was Tokyo or if it was like Yokohama, but he was one of these people who just needed adventure. A lot of people in my family apparently did, and he tried to stow away on a ship, but he was caught, and then he was only like 15 or so, and so he instead of imprisoning him, they just kept him there as a laborer on the dock.
Oh wow!
And then he kind of bided his time and took another opportunity to get on another ship.
Try it again.
Yeah, it was a British merchant ship that went to Vancouver. And then he got off the ship in Vancouver and sort of made his way down the coast, and he worked as a janitor in a church in Oregon. And I think spent a couple of years in the United States. And but then went back to Japan. He sort of converted to Christianity while he was working at the church. And was got this Christian fever and went back to Japan and became a missionary there, and then came back to the States again several years later as a missionary for the Japanese American community in Southern California.
Oh wow! Okay.
So it was he's an interesting guy.
A colorful life. What I like about that story, I think it's one of the things that drew me to this anthology, is the complexity of immigrant stories, and how very often, if you don't have a recent immigrant past, or relatives that have been immigrants, I think a lot of people expect the stories to be very linear, like came to America, landed on Ellis Island, stayed forever, and so I think your great grandfather's story is a great illustration of how messy it can be. People come, people go, people move around. So I like that. It's very cool.
Yeah. And then I should say, actually, then he went back to Japan again, and it wasn't until my dad was the first permanent resident, right? Actually, so so he came over a couple of generations later. It's pretty
that makes
cool.
so much sense to me. Certainly my family history is like sort of mixed up and convoluted like that, which makes it hard to explain sometimes. People are
Mm-hmm.
like, where are you from? Which we're going to get to, because that features prominently in your story.
Yeah.
But okay, so the anthology, talk to me a little bit about what drew you to it. Did you have the idea first? Did you know Addie, who edited, or kind of what got you to it to come on in?
Yeah. So there was, I had in my very first novel was about a daughter of an immigrant
Mhm.
family, and there were pieces of that story that when you're writing a novel, there are scenes you have to take out because they don't fit the plot smoothly, and so those I had sort of all saved up in places, and along with just a jumble of my own memories and paragraphs about a character I might one day write. And and Adi put the call out for stories, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, this is just the place I can like put all those things together in one piece.
Yeah.
And and that's, so I said, yes, me please. And I got really lucky, and he said, sure.
And here we are. That's very cool. Yeah. Okay, good. So now I want to dig into your story, which I mentioned I read in preparation for I'd read it, back when we had proofs, but now I read it again in preparation for this. Now I would talk to you. And there's just so much to love. And what's interesting to me, again, so my parents grew up in Argentina, and I came over, we came over when I was small. My parents overstayed a visitor's visa. And by small, I mean like an infant. And then went back to Argentina. My mom and I spent 2 years there, and then crossed the Mexican border undocumented into the US when I was 8. And so again, obviously a very different family history than yours. But as I was reading your story, I was like, I just want to hug this story into my heart. Like, so many of the experiences were similar. I mean, I'll run through it as we talk about it, but the commonalities, I think that's what I'm hoping for with this anthology, for kids when they read it, to see themselves in some way in these stories. I think your story does so much about that. So do you want to set it up a little bit, talk a little bit about the plot?
Yeah, so it's almost more a series of vignettes than a plot. I mean, there's a general through line. There's this girl, and it opens when she's in college, and she's grown up in the Midwest, and she's going to college in North Carolina, and her new roommate's parents ask her own parents, "Where are you from?" And that sort of triggers this series of memories. And so there's this sort of subplot is this experience she has, a memory she has of a girl who came to her class, a Japanese immigrant, to her junior high school class when she was in junior high school, and Eriko's ambivalence about being friends with this new girl, and associating herself with someone who is Japanese, because she herself is trying so hard to be American, which in that context means white. And so she's sort of coming to grips with that.
I felt that moment so hard, that kind of, I don't know, Mad Max element of middle school, where it's like, survive in the Thunderdome, whatever. I may be mixing my metaphors. I may be getting but just this, like, even though she's feeling the pull, like she wants to help this girl and be welcoming to this girl, she understands that she also needs maybe to separate herself a little bit, and then how bad she feels about that. The girl who comes that Eriko is ambivalent about is named Miho, and I just wanted to tell you, I had my own personal Miho. I was a little younger than your character. I want to say I was in either the 4th or the 5th grade, and I had just sort of learned English and kind of broken away from that. That's the weird new kid, let's not talk to her. I was just starting to make friends, and then a new girl came who spoke only Spanish, and then they wanted me to, again, the teacher, well, me, suppose, but like put me in that spot of like, you should show her around and you should. And I remember those feelings. You captured them so well. Those feelings of, oh no, like you're putting kind of an anvil around my neck. I'm trying to float up, and you're, in this kind of dog eat dog world. I think you use the phrase dog eat dog world. So I get it.
Yeah, it was tough. And that came from, I didn't actually have that same experience, but it was a boy. So I wasn't expected to be friends with him, but I did, and I, and he, but I worked hard to distance myself from him, and looking, and I knew I was wrong and I felt bad about it, but I was like, I cannot. And so this is partly me sort of apologizing to that boy.
I know. Isn't that what writing sometimes
awful.
is, right? Yeah, just so many gems, and I don't want to give too much of it away. There's all of this like richness and wonderful thing. I have notes. I keep looking off to the side because I have notes, and one of my notes says, "Do not ask, can you use chopsticks?" Because that's throughout the story. So say a little bit more about that, about kind of how people try to find like the easiest common denominator when they learn you're from somewhere else, and how they sometimes say things that are not helpful.
It's interesting. And I use chopsticks because it really has been a thing in my life. Like, I can't remember if I left it in the story, but my own mom used to, I didn't. There was a scene that I pulled that was directly from my life, where Eriko's mom is saying, like, Japanese kids at your age can eat scrambled eggs with their chopsticks.
Oh wow!
And our other Japanese friend who's your age can already do it. Like, why can't you? And
I think my favorite line about the chopsticks is when her mom is like, "Would you put a fork in your hair?"
yes, because I tried that too. Like, I tried the thing with the chopsticks when I was a teenager,
right.
But I had to use our actual chopsticks, and then it just felt like I can't do that. That's gross. But and it's this about people really are trying, right, to connect. And I mean, now as an old person, I feel a little bit more forgiving, because I understand that, like, if you have nothing else, you just grab what you can. And unfortunately, with the whole idea, like the one narrative, the single story, like there's a limited number of things you can, that if you don't know about that culture very much, then you grab onto whatever you have, and it's, it can get tiresome because it's often the same things over and over. I often get asked about sushi, and sometimes I don't mind it, and sometimes it's like, oh, really? Not again. And I'm sure is the same for you, probably.
I get that. So I'm dating. I'm single, and so I mean, not precisely now, because I'm kind of in quarantine and not leaving my house, but I have dated in the last few years, and and I present as white, and if I'm not speaking Spanish, people don't know necessarily my background, and then when it comes out, eventually it just comes out in conversation. And men will always say, "Ooh, I love Latin women. They're so hot-blooded." It's like,
oh
really? Is that what we're going with? So, and again, like you, on the one hand, I understand they're just trying to connect and with whatever tools they have, but then it does get tiresome. So, so what I like about stories like you and yours rather, and the stories in the anthology is, hopefully readers will come to see some of that nuance and come to understand. And by the way, we're all still figuring it out and still trying to, find out what the right questions are and how to view someone. So hopefully just the more empathy we can engender, the better it will be for everyone.
Yeah.
Is there any other kind of theme or moment in the story that you wanted to talk about that that I haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I think there is this as a child of an immigrant or an immigrant child growing up, it's like you're straddling two worlds often, right? And it's that push-pull of like, I want to be here in America and as like American as I can be. And you know, at the same time that I was pushing away being Japanese, there were parts of it that I really loved, and that I was proud of. And so I wanted to weave that in there, which I hope makes it in. And then, you know, and then going back to Japan and people, it was, my grandmother was really excited. She loved to tell people that I couldn't speak Japanese because she thought that was kind of cool, that I looked like I should be able to. But then I would feel stupid. It's, I don't know, that feeling of being like not quite where you know, not quite fitting in.
Yeah, you know, I feel that
either way.
I loved that moment with her dad when she's talking about the United States and she says, we, you know, we did this.
Mm-hmm.
And her dad's like, well, why do you say we, you know? And that is such an important moment, because it's like, well, yes, we, but also not we, like who is we in this context, right? Like, I think that's really, and I mean, I grapple with that all the time still, you know, like I'm American, but I'm not 100% American. You know, I'm like, my citizenship is American, but my customs are from somewhere else. And so it's just always never quite this, but never quite that. So I feel that.
Yeah. And my parents now too, like, you know, they've lived here now for, I forget, I don't know, 50 years. Well, yeah, because I'm, a little over 50 years. And they don't fit in Japan anymore, right? And so, I mean, that's not a young adult story, but but it's been interesting to watch them like go back and be like, they dress differently, they move differently, they've been here long enough that I can pick them out in a crowd, just, you know.
That's right. It's funny, I always joke with my mom. My mom came when she was 21, and she's in her 70s now. And so she'll still to this day say, you know, these Americans, and sometimes it's a positive, like these Americans have it all figured out, or sometimes it's these Americans do this thing that, and I'm like, you have spent more time here than you ever did there. How are you still kind of on the other side, you know?
Yes.
But it's still these Americans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I get that a lot too. I mean, I'm 51, and my mom is still like, you're too American, or like, well, like, you know, we went to Japan 2 or 3 years ago and I brought my children and she's like, well, you're being disrespectful. And I'm like, Mom, I'm like, I'm actually,
yeah. It is an ongoing, I think it's an identity, right? Which I think is something that we all touch on in our stories. It's an identity that, like, no matter how much time you spend with, you know, people from the old country and then people here, the identity is of being from both and neither.
Yeah.
And it carries on. I mean, I see it in my own children as well, you know, how they grapple with the language and the customs, and they want more than I gave them. And they ask me, like, why didn't you speak to me more in Spanish? And, you know, so it's a multi-generational thing, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, cool. So, I, again, love this story. I mean, I think all of the stories are awesome, but, the Where I'm From is definitely one of the ones that people should check out when they read Come On In. Again, sorry, I don't have an advanced review copy, so I just got this print out. And by the way, I noticed, look, we're kind of directly opposite. Like, all the names of all the contributors are around here, and I'm here. So we're like two little brothers. All right, this was very cool. Thank you very much for
thank you.
on this call with me, and I hope everyone could. It comes out in October. Do you remember the specific date?
I don't remember the date.
Yes, early October. It's available for pre-order wherever you like to get your books. So please check it out. Thank you. Take care.